And then we have an invited guest from the Red Cross that's here to answer questions, because I'm sure people have lots of questions. Now, if you remember when Pastor Mark did his education things, he always did a prime the pump question. So I'm going to start with a priming the pump question and ask people to do a little bit of one-to-one sharing. So hopefully the one-to-one sharing is not necessarily with your spouse, but that might work too. And the question is, have you ever had a time in which a disruption, a fire, earthquake, tornado, a storm, a flood, has caused you to think you may need to shelter in place, leave your home, or not be able to go home? So give you a few minutes to talk about that with either the people at your table or a one-to-one conversation. Well, it appears that people have had some of these experiences. So, the Pacific Northwest is being impacted by climate change. Climate change affects the regions in different ways. So, due to the large geographic area that spans Oregon and Washington, we have different climates. But temperatures have warmed by 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit since 1900 throughout the region. And you think, well, that's not that much. But then I remember my little picture of my little thermometer that I have in my kitchen that once said 116 degrees on it, not too long ago. The more precipitation is now falling as rain rather than snow, which means that we are losing our snowpack in much of the region. Extreme events like droughts, floods, wildfires, and heat waves are occurring more often. And glaciers are melting. So there's permafrost thaw, which is increasing the breakup of river and sea ice as it's occurring in the year. So not too long ago, I know that you all talked about these things, but here's kind of just a really quick look at kind of some of the things that have happened to us in Oregon, in Northwest Oregon, in the last several years. The Gorge Wildfire in 2017. I don't know if you remember that, but I do remember walking out to my car in Northwest Portland, and it appeared in September, and it appeared to be snowing, only it was ash falling on my car. The Labor Day wildfires of 2020, extreme drought, the heat dome of June 2022, the flooding due to an atmospheric river in the December of 2023. We're also thinking about like what's going on here, like right now with an atmospheric river that's happening. The hottest year on record was 2023. And you can't forget the ice storm and windstorm that we had in January of this year. So part of my role as a clinical nurse specialist for critical care, I worked with the Oregon Burn Center, and we developed a disaster plan for a mass casualty event with the Oregon Burn Center. And one of our kind of things that we always said to each other as we did this is, as we developed that, was hope is not a plan. Because in fact, we can all hope that things will be okay, but you really need to have a plan. So think about those kind of things. How will I receive emergency alerts and warnings? Where will we meet? What is my shelter plan? What is my evacuation route? What is my family household communication plan? Do I need to update my emergency preparedness kit? Thank you, Ellen, for bringing some information for us on that. So here's the situation. St. Andrew has the physical resources and a space to serve as a place of refuge during a time of disruption for the people of St. Andrew and our neighbors. However, the church does not have the staff or trained volunteers to support those needs. So we have seen the impact of climate disruption over the last several years. These impacts have included wildfires, floods, heat waves, and winter storms. There's also a very high likelihood of a major earthquake in our area. In the winter storm of 2024, it disrupted the community with power outages, fallen trees, and destroyed residences. Several members of St. Andrew who had access to the building sought refuge during that time here at St. Andrew. Only the people, however, who had access to the building were able to do that. A similar disruption is likely to draw additional members as well as people of the community. As one of the EarthTerra team members had said in developing her disaster plan, St. Andrew's on my list. So they will come if we're prepared or not. So here's the assessment. The Oregon Synod, through its climate resilience cohort, is encouraging congregations to consider becoming resilience hubs or climate resilience hubs, which are trusted places that cultivate physical, social, and ecological well-being for the sense of belonging and safety. St. Andrew already serves as a place of belonging for its members, for the Head Starts families, for the Taiwan Lutheran Church, and all of these groups that use our facility, Tai Chi, yoga, Scouts. I mean, we are a place of safety and refuge for all of those people. The facility of St. Andrew has optimal space and physical resources for providing such a place. However, as I said, we don't have the volunteer resources and expertise to provide for the physical needs of people during a disruption. So let me say a little bit more about climate resilience hubs. The resilience hubs idea are trusted places and networks of care designed by and for communities that cultivate physical, social, and ecological well-being with a sense of belonging and safety. They support the day-to-day life and activate during disruptions and recovery efforts before, during, and after a climate-related emergency and disasters. So climate resilience hubs are community institutions, libraries, churches, schools, nonprofits, local businesses, and others. They help educate residents about extreme weather, preparedness, and other impacts of climate change. Hubs can also help residents respond to extreme weather events through material assistance. For instance, hubs can provide phone charging during a power outage, provide for air conditioning during a heat wave, provide shelter or meals for those in need. Just so I want you to know that 3 of our members, Liz Hardy, Pat Christensen, and I are actually part of the climate resilience cohort through the Oregon Synod. It's a sacred organizing group. And that's where we really learned a lot more about climate resilience hubs and the encouragement the Synod is doing in terms of that. So the Red Cross we have a representative from the Red Cross that has assessed our facility and is offering to join with us in a facility use agreement to provide volunteer resources during an emergency or a disaster. The people in need would not be directed to come to St. Andrew until the Red Cross is on site and prepared to receive them. So it's not like we're going to have everybody at our doors before we're ready. A recommendation from another church, and Noelle can talk a lot more about this because she talked to another church that does have a facility use agreement. The comment was their awesome flexibility and efficiency. The chain of command had military precision. The pastor concluded that he would work with them again in a heartbeat. And this was during a fire event in Southwest Washington. The Earth Care team and the service committee unanimously support an agreement with the Red Cross. So that's why we're doing this. So we're sharing this information. But I'm sure you'll have lots more questions. So our recommendation is that we enter into a facility use agreement with the Red Cross as a first step in becoming a climate resilience hub. Based on feedback, that we would present a final recommendation to the council, and the council will be the decision-making body in terms of that. So now what I want to do is open this up for questions, because I'm sure you have tons of questions about this. And so Noelle is going to introduce our guest, and we'll listen to and we'll be able to answer your questions. So you can. Or you can stand on the...
I'm Noelle Melhorn, and I'm on the church council, and I'm an acting secretary right now. And I today would like to introduce Alan Smith, who is a facilities lead for the Cascade region of the American Red Cross. And he will provide you with some information about the Red Cross, about the facility use agreements, and answer any questions that you might have.
Can I wander around with this?
Well, I can wander with the mic.
Okay.
And keep
Okay.
that mic. How's that?
Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Alan Smith with the American Red Cross. Our Cascade region covers Oregon and Southwest Washington, so that's our grouping of workers and volunteers. As you know, probably the American Red Cross is a long-standing organization. We were established in 1881 by a famous nurse, Clara Barton, and still going strong. We're 90% volunteer work driven, and 90 cents on our donor dollars goes to supporting things like active shelters. So I don't have a presentation, but I'm happy to talk just a little bit about what it would mean to be on our list of available shelters. So we've been working with your folks here for some months to help them understand our processes and how things work, but I'll go over those briefly with you here. We maintain a national shelter database of previously identified locations that might be available to use as a shelter or other disaster-related facility during a disaster. We do sheltering in facilities. We also have service delivery sites where we work to provide services to clients affected by a disaster. Sometimes have partners in with us like FEMA, here Washington County, state agencies, that sort of thing, in to give those clients the best services we can to help them move on from the disaster to their better future. Having a facility use agreement with the Red Cross does not obligate your church to be a shelter. What we do is identify those locations that are suitable, have suitable facilities and amenities like restrooms, plenty of parking, that sort of thing, in advance so that we know what we're getting into if we would want to open a shelter in this area. If we did have a disaster, our professionals at the office look at those shelters in this area, for example, and determine what those best would be used for. So we have other places like Cedar Hills Recreation Center that's maybe a mile away from here. That's on our shelter list as well. So we work with Tualatin Hills Park and Rec District as we are working with you to have those places surveyed and kind of ready to go. If we did have a disaster, though, we understand that not every facility is available every day to use for those purposes. So we would call a couple of your designated representatives to ask if your facility would be available for the current situation, and that person would describe what's going on, like we have an ice storm or something like that, and we need to shelter an estimated X number of people, which would fit in your facility. So your representatives would then agree to that or not at that point in time, depending on the availability of your facility. That if you said yes, then the Red Cross starts activating its volunteers and resources to turn this room in particular into a dormitory space if we were wanting to shelter here. We have around our region and around the Portland area trailers full of shelter materials. We call them just shelter trailers full of cots, blankets, and some simple items that allow us to start a shelter facility. certainly don't have everything stored in them, but that's the initial thing we can do so we can provide a safe place for people to come to. Those clients, we feed them, of course, they all need to eat, and the Red Cross takes that responsibility. We don't cook food anymore. Years ago we used to, but we work with partners in areas. It depends on the size of the shelter and disaster, how much food we need, and that kind of drives if we can just find it commercially in the area, if there are places who still have power that can provide that service. We do work with other partners, though. One is the Southern Baptist Convention, or Baptist Convention, does a nationwide effort to help feed people, and so we work often with them. We provide their materials, and they provide their kitchen trailers and their volunteers to help prepare food for us. A question that Noel brought up to me earlier was, how do you deal with pets? Because pets are increasingly becoming known to us as an integral part of a family. If you have pets, they're a family member just like a human. And in the Red Cross's experience, nationwide, we find clients won't leave their homes in a disaster if they can't be comfortable with what's happening to their pets. So the Red Cross is a large and long-standing organization, so we move kind of slowly in processes like that. But we certainly realize that we need to deal with pets. Kind of two categories. One are service animals, like dogs to assist a blind person or something like that. Those animals we permit in our facilities because we want to support those clients. We don't discriminate on our clients by accessibility or their functional needs, race, religion, citizenship, anything. We accept clients, and we want to provide them the services that they need during that disaster. So service animals is one situation. We kind of call the rest household pets. And those, we do provide assistance working with other animal welfare organizations, like humane societies. There are a lot of organizations around the state for that. Go ahead.
Kind of working around saying that in the circumstance in which if we did partner with the Red Cross, we would need to set up an animal shelter to correspond here, but it would be the church's responsibility rather than Red Cross's?
No.
Okay.
I'll repeat the question. It was being asked, is the church responsible for that, or is the Red Cross? The Red Cross would take the responsibility for setting that up. So we would work with that organization they can bring in pet crates for animals and pet supplies like food and leashes and all that sort of stuff. And we would devise an area here outside for those pets to stay. Not service animals, but the household pets. So we don't really have a covered area here outside, so we would have to do something with pop-up tents to make an area kind of as quiet an area, but accessible to the pet owners, because they're still responsible for taking care of their pets, feeding them and walking them, that sort of thing. Continue.
How many people have pets here right now? So about like 50% of our group has pets. So in a shelter, that would actually be a significant additional shelter then, along with the human part of the right shelter.
It can be. So it really just depends on the situation, how many shelter clients come with their pets.
And do you provide at least like one animal technician or whatever they call assistants in the vet?
We work with other organizations to provide people that monitor the pet situation and ensure that the food is there, that the pets are in their crates and all that. So that the Red Cross doesn't have pet qualified people, I guess I'll put it. We don't have a pet specialty in our sheltering area. So we work with those organizations, and they monitor the situation, again, relying on the pet owner to do actually taking care of their pets. Is that clear? Thanks. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's a new-ish thing for us at the Red Cross, but it's certainly an important aspect to be considered, and we do in all of our active shelters.
So I'm going to keep asking questions. So, well, here, then take the mic. People can online here.
Oh, heavens. So I'm close to me now? Are we close enough? All right. So I understand about the cots, the blankets, basics like that you have a trailer with those things. What about porta potties? Because this is a large building and the facilities are not designed to carry the burden of so many people. So is that part of what you would provide in shelter management?
Yes, short answer, yes.
Okay.
We've looked around the facility a few months ago. There's restrooms upstairs and downstairs, and a couple showers downstairs also that clients would appreciate using, that we've talked about. But yes, we're pretty flexible in what we do with our shelters. We can bring in almost anything at a cost to our donor dollars. So we can bring in some cases, shower trailers. You might have imagined those being used for firefighters in wildfires. They bring them into a county fairgrounds, bring in shower trailers. We can bring in laundry trailers even. They can operate those somewhat self-sufficient.
How many of those do you have locally? Because you have a lot of shelters that you're administering, obviously, or working with. And is there, say, like you would do the rounds with a shelter, shower trailer, like take it to one facility for Tuesdays and Wednesdays and take it to another facility nearby for Thursdays and Fridays?
We haven't done that. They're not that mobile. So we contract with all that. The Red Cross can't really afford to own resources like that or operate them. So we contract out to the same companies that do it for like wildfires. So they would bring them in from their locations as we determine as needed.
So the priority list for these then to be assigned, where would St. Andrews fall in a priority list for getting those kinds of services?
It's pretty disaster dependent, I guess. What is the overall situation? Is it a local thing here or a more regional thing? So being on our list is not really a prioritized thing. It's a thing if we determine there's a disaster or the county asks us to open a shelter in this part of Portland metro area, we would look at what options do we have for capacity, facilities, availability, and make that determination at that time. And then once we get in operation, they would say, okay, we got to rent some showers because we need more shower space. We kind of activate that. But the initial thing is just getting inside, getting cots established.
So,
Please, go ahead.
So, kind of to go to a more general sort of question for us here at St. Andrew, this facility use agreement, which is what we're talking about here today, is, I understand, not fully written yet. We're just discussing whether we're going to have one. And when it comes to writing one, at that time you assess the building and what our capacity is, and therefore if we go on some list, we'll be on some list with a capacity that we can take here. And so that's my understanding. Is that true?
Yes, the agreement is a standard Red Cross agreement nationally, which we've worked kind of initially as an example here. But yes, the agreement itself doesn't specify shelter capacity or anything like that. It notes what portion of your facility we might use. which we've done a stab at that already, and we can add what portions are not available to use, like you're saying, sanctuary and whatever you tell us. So it should be well defined in advance what might or might not be used, so that you can be comfortable what it might be like.
That was actually my question, was about capacity in terms of like, what are you anticipating would be the capacity of this facility? And then also, would there be an expectation of St. Andrew volunteers assisting the Red Cross in when this facility is activated? What would that look like?
I forget the square footage of this area, but our overall guidelines for dormitory space, if we, when we move in, when we use a facility, in addition to dormitory space, we need to feed people outside of where they're probably sleeping. So this would probably be the dormitory. It's the largest space. It's great for us to manage because a couple of people, we always have 2 people on our staff or volunteers present, so they could easily monitor this area. It's 40 square feet per cot, per person, effectively. And I forget the square footage in this room, so I apologize. It's probably 50-ish or something like that, cots in this room. That sort of number. A gymnasium is typically like 100 cots, like Cedar Hills Rec Center's gym, the old school gym. That's probably 100 people, just to give you a visual on that. The Red Cross is self-sufficient in our operations, so we work with our own volunteers and staff to staff a place like a shelter or a service delivery site. We can use what we call event-based volunteers, and we run them through a quick
We'll switch and get this fixed.
batteries, I guess. I'm back. A quick Red Cross training so that they know our processes and all that. There's not an expectation that you would provide volunteers, but they're certainly welcome. But they would be folded into a kind of our Red Cross volunteer base to do whatever task, whether it's feeding, for example, or monitoring the shelter area, that sort of thing. So we're happy to accept volunteers on the fly, but we kind of bring them into our supervision and training to make sure that our operations are fully up to snuff for our standards. And you too, yeah.
So for the last bunch of years, I've been involved with another group in this area called Cedar Hills Ready. Are you familiar with that group?
I am a little bit, yes.
Okay. I'm just wondering if there would be a connection with what they do. They just have a new name called Neighbors Ready. I just got an email about that. And what they do is help people organize their neighborhoods, to find out what the resources are in your near neighborhoods. But also, I see your pocket plan. They have all that sort of stuff. Is there a connection there, or are you duplicating services with what they do?
The Cedar Hills Ready is part of a national sort of program we call Community Emergency Response Teams, CERT. And they're one example of that. I live in Tigard myself, and I'm part of Tigard CERT, a very similar organization to Cedar Hills Ready. And what we do, as well as Cedar Hills Ready, is largely education of individuals so that they can help themselves in a disaster or an emergency. So there's lots of training. Part of that is training for yourself. How do you make an emergency kit, which there's information in those brochures that I brought. Doing that, but it's more on the, I wouldn't say self-sufficiency side, but it's more how to prepare you for that eventuality. And then in our CERT training and in their training that they've received, we always take care of ourselves first and our families before we start acting as Cedar Hills Ready or Tigard CERT to help our community. We don't often work with CERT groups, although I have before. About a year ago, I was in Amarillo for some flooding and a tornado for the Red Cross, but we also had some partner help with a CERT team down in Amarillo. So we have worked with them, but they usually have different tasks, I guess, than what they do. They're not typically shelter trained how to operate a shelter or work in one. So we would welcome them as Red Cross volunteers, but
Yeah.
they typically do have a different thing going on.
As I listen to you, I'm seeing that you're more the big places where people go, and they're more how neighbors can help themselves through this. I just was wondering if there was duplication and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question.
All right.
Please.
I was just wondering, in case of a power outage, and we're one of these places, who provides the generators in cases like that? Or do we just, I don't know what we would do.
Well, if the power was out here at your church, we wouldn't open a shelter here if we had that choice. And if the power went out while we were a shelter, we would look for an alternative location to support all those clients. Just like I mentioned, we accept everybody into our shelters regardless of their needs, and nowadays there are people who need some medical devices that require power, like CPAP machines and other things like that we have to help support, because that's what helps keep them healthy and alive. So two ways. We probably wouldn't open a shelter in a place that had no power, because we have to provide warmth and all that. So we would look to, if there's somewhere nearby, like if Cedar Hills Recreation Center happens to have power, we would go there first or move over there, and we would somehow get our clients over there to switch our operation. And that happens on disaster relief operations that we do. We don't like having to move people because it's disturbing to them and it's a lot of work, but it certainly happens that we have to close a facility down due to flooding approaching one place, and got to get out of town. Like Texas right now in the Houston area is terrible flooding, and the Red Cross is heavily in action there already. So,
yeah, hi.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for coming.
Good morning.
And sharing. So my question is that there's always risk involved, when you open up your home or this is home for us, right? So is it kind of a joint liability if something happens, a truck happens to back up into the building, and how is that all wrapped up into this conversation?
Great question. So the Red Cross first has a super insurance policy that we can get you on as well, or you would be on if we occupied here. That's one aspect. When we come to you and ask if we can use your facility during disaster, at that point in time, we want to do what we call an opening inspection. So a person, me maybe others, comes here hopefully before we've opened the doors to clients to make a just-in-time assessment of the facility. And we do it's kind of like not really, like a home inspector when you buy or sell a home. They go around and check everything out. Well, at a little bit of a level like that, we come in and check everything out, walking with your facility representative at that point in time to note anything, like the carpet here. Are there any stains on the carpet? Are there any bad spots on the carpet? We look at the walls, the corners of the walls. We check all the toilets and the sinks and all that stuff. The parking areas, is there any damage out in the parking area? So we do that opening inspection. It takes an hour-ish or something like that. And we document all that with a report and photos. So that's our before condition. And let's say we've been operation for a week here, and we then close the operation. So we clean up after ourselves, and we do a closing inspection. Ideally with the same person that we did the opening inspection, but doesn't have to be. And then we walk through, do the same sort of thing to identify any issues that have happened during the occupancy by the Red Cross. And we'll take responsibility for making things right, or we will work with you to make things right at that point. Like maybe there was a piece of the corner molding damaged because we were wheeling in carts of food or something like that, and somebody banged the corner there. So we would work with your folks to determine, well, what is the damage? Was that there before or not? And to make it right. So the Red Cross will make it right. We use our donor dollars, the same donor dollars, to do that sort of thing. So we work with you to make sure a kind of reasonable and equitable solution comes about after that. But our goal is to not just be here once. We want to have a relationship, like I was talking with Noel about, with you, so that we would be able to be welcomed back again. If we had to use your place once, we want to be able to have a happy experience and a great experience, as your folks have talked to a church up in Camas, I think it was, which some great experience
I can
last
give
fall.
some information on
Sure,
that.
yeah. Anyway, that's my answer for your question.
So in December, excuse me, I talked with Pastor James Austin at the Camas Church of Nazarene. It was a fairly long conversation. Their church has a agreement with the Red Cross there, and he has been at the church for three and a half years. And last summer was the first time that he had been called about their church being used as a shelter. It was during the wildfires there. So he had some interesting comments that about concerns about damage and things. He said, let's see, they had about, their shelter lasted about a week. They had 20 people that were housed inside, and about another 30 that were in trailers in the parking lot. Comments about cleaning. They said the church was actually in better shape after the sheltering than before, because the Red Cross came in and cleaned the windows and vacuumed and all this. They said their church overhang was damaged accidentally by an Airstream that was pulled underneath it. And the Airstream had major damage. The damage to the church was, he called it minor, but he was a bit concerned that he'd have to call his own insurance company to pay. But he said the Red Cross paid for the repair of the building and took care of the family with the damaged Airstream. He said the damage occurred, or the Red Cross said the damage occurred under their watch, so they felt responsible. Security, at this church, they had a daily school in their building, and the children continued to safely attend. The children had their activities in some different rooms than they would originally normally be in, but they said that worked fine. There was no one designated as their security patrol, but they said they had no problems at all. They had more Red Cross volunteers there than probably needed to be there, but they said every corner of their church was watched. They had no problems whatsoever. They do not have a shower or a washer and dryer at their church, but neighbors help people with showering. They called around for some portable showers and toilets, but those are mainly available in Seattle and in Portland, so they couldn't get those facilities over to Camas. They said the space concerns, it was a slight inconvenience for the church. He felt that the slight inconvenience of donating space and helping displaced people was well worth any inconvenience that they had. He also said that he would work with the Red Cross again in a heartbeat. He said working with them was awesome and pure joy. So he also said that he's worked with the Red Cross with organizing some community events in Camas for emergency preparedness. And they had one, before I talked to him, they'd had one event since the sheltering at their church. And they said about 100 people attended, and they were left with duffel bags that were holding emergency items, including flashlights and battery-operated radios, as long as a lot of good information. So that was basically what he had passed on to me. So covered some of the events.
Pam has a question here. And then I'll get to Tara.
What we're getting at, that was a great partnership with them. That I had actually attended that emergency preparedness event after the fire, and they had done a great job in their community soliciting donations of things like those flashlights and all that. They got Walmart to donate things, and other, I think the local lumber store donated some materials as well. So it was a great partnership. But we do provide those educational services, not just the brochures, but we can bring in classes like on emergency preparedness, even ones for kids. We call it Prepare with Pedro, and a young child program for preparedness. So please go ahead.
So what if it's the world blows up? Something like major, and nobody has any power or water or anything. And maybe this building is lucky enough to still be on its four legs. Would the Red Cross help people? Or if this building wasn't alive, does the Red Cross give any guidance to people on what on earth they do? Do they stay in their backyard? If there isn't water, if there isn't anything?
That's part of our training programs, our emergency preparedness sort of things to help you know and prepare a kit in advance at home, including things like storing water. Now the mantra is 2 weeks ready. So we used to say have things on hand to survive through 3 days of self-sufficiency, water and everything. Now we're saying 2 weeks ready, because it takes longer to get those services back in operation, we hope. If it's a truly gigantic thing like the Cascadia earthquake, which we hope doesn't happen in our lifetimes, I'm not sure how the Red Cross would help differently than any of the other organizations. We work with all the counties around. They all have emergency management professionals and organizations. I know Courtney Yan is a Washington County emergency manager, and she helps the county think of things like sheltering and self-sufficiency and things like that. So I guess we'd use all our resources together to work out the best plan for people. We were talking earlier about Cedar Hills Ready. If you're in this area, that's a great organization to at least get in tune with, to learn things about how you can help be prepared. This preparedness brochure we have called Prepare. Here I had some with me today. it not only helps you build a kit, but it helps give you guidance, like what to do in case of an earthquake or something like that. So it's a great resource. Another question?
I'm afraid so.
Sure.
I have 3 questions. One is, will you continue to provide training over time if we partnered with you? So maybe initial training for volunteers, say in January, and then again, an option to do it again in March, or extended specialized training. If you assert you understand that enhanced training, so to provide perhaps maybe food management rather than just generalized shelter management, or how to specifically deal with, for example, troubled people. Well, there's going to be a lot of emotional distress. So specialized training, would that be something that you would provide, or is that something we'd look more toward CERT organization for? And I have 2 other questions.
Okay,
after
let's go ahead and answer that first before I forget aspects of it. We can provide training. We can work with you in an ongoing manner to provide training. If folks here intend to be Red Cross volunteers, we have training sequences for them that apply to aspects like sheltering, feeding. We have a class, psychological first aid.
Are those required for the Red Cross volunteer to be able to work in that area in a Red Cross shelter?
Yes.
Okay.
So earlier we talked about event-based volunteers. If, say, we had a situation here and you had a few people who really seriously wanted to volunteer, we sometimes provide during the disaster some training for people. So we give them essentially a condensed on-site version of that training, maybe in a separate office or room where we can kind of hide away for a couple of hours with them so that they understand our Red Cross policies and procedures and then be an active volunteer with us.
Okay, so the key is, yes, you would have to have specialized training to work in that area. Mm-hmm. And if this is a Red Cross shelter, all volunteers must be Red Cross volunteers. Is that?
If you're working in the shelter, yes. The church may have other aspects, like they may, I'm trying to think of a service they could provide outside of it. It might be, if this was a service delivery site, we might have clients coming in and out to receive services here, maybe not sheltering here, but getting services. So
You're talking about a point of distribution.
Similar to that, yes. So you could provide some external, like security or traffic services to make sure we didn't end up with a big traffic jam here if people were coming in and out. So it's it is like a point of distribution, okay, where people are coming here for services and then leaving, right?
Thank you. Another question is medical patients. People who say need just a little extra care, and maybe Pastor Lori or Mr. India could answer. We have 2 parish nurses. Would they be able to be Red Cross volunteers? Well, volunteer in our shelter, or would they probably be allocated to a clinic or a hospital?
Can you
Go
ahead.
That?
So the parish nurses don't do direct patient care in their role as a parish nurse. And, one of our parish nurses is a retired RN, another is an active nurse practitioner. And so any nurse would either work with their employer organization or a volunteer organization to do that. So for instance, I'm a retired nurse. I'm no longer licensed because I'm retired. I haven't worked enough hours in the last 5 years. So I have the expertise. I do not have a license. I cannot act as an RN. I could not. No. Yeah. I mean, when I was licensed, I gave lots of COVID injections, but I'm not anymore. Yeah.
From the Red Cross perspective, we provide services like that to our residents, clients. We have specialties, mental health specialties, health, we call it disaster health services, would be nursing or doctors that are part of our volunteer team, even spiritual care services. So we have people we can call on in our region to come and be here to be that. Depends on how spread out we are. They may be what we call itinerating, where they would move from one shelter to another each day, perhaps visit in the morning here and another shelter in the afternoon. But we have those people also as volunteers.
Okay, excellent. And communication. I understand, yeah, I was with Tigard for a long time doing training for this, so. But the D1 Resource Net, as a Red Cross, are you at all in connection with the emergency management teams and the Resource Net? So if we needed something, say, an extra 18 cases of water or an extra pallet of this or that, would we be allowed to access that Resource Net to request help or to offer it?
We don't do a whole lot with amateur radio in the Red Cross. We do have, we know who we are. I'm an amateur radio person through my CERT work. We work through all of the emergency management agencies and communications to them to help provide all the resources that might be needed in a situation. So
it sounds like you would work more directly with an agency rather than go through the regional resource nets.
that'd be my guess. That is my experience. I haven't really seen that put into use, but every disaster is different, so I can't really speak
Right.
for what might come into play at any one time.
But in terms of St. Andrews, we don't need to worry about a communication team, for example. You would be that liaison to whatever agency it is that we need resources from.
Correct. Yes, and the Red Cross, our staff really has those relationships with all of the county emergency managers and things like that. So I don't really work with those emergency managers, but our paid staff does and has those relationships. Like I mentioned, Courtney Ann out Washington County, our disaster program manager, Jamie Adams, who's for this Portland metro area, she is the one who has those county relationships to show what resources we come to the table with for the Red Cross, and you do. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
I think our
Thank you.
time is almost up. So, one last question for Alan?
One last question. To clarify my other question, if this building is not standing, then it's generally in a big earthquake deal. It's generally recommended that people just stay home, stay what's left of it, just stay there.
Certainly initially, yes. And I want to make sure you get one of these brochures before you leave, because no, really, it talks about things like that. What do you do? Yeah. And yes, certainly if the structure of your home is intact or intact enough, yes, because that's your home.
Well, you got a big
first of all.
backyard, Pam.
Yes. So, but you still need to have resources available on your own as well as in your neighborhood. So learning about your neighbors, and there's a program called Neighborhood Ready that's part of this Cedar Hills team, can come to your neighborhood and actually introduce you to all your neighbors if you don't know everybody and what resources they might have. Are there any doctors on the street? Is there anybody with a chainsaw that can help cut up a tree that's blocking the road? That sort of thing. So, yes.
The house is gone, but this building is standing on its four legs. Even with no water power or anything like that, would the Red Cross direct people to stay here because at least it's a cover?
I don't know that I can really answer that directly. I guess I don't know. Every situation would be different. but if a big earthquake happened, it's gonna take quite a bit of time to assess what facilities are still structurally viable. So if your home was damaged, I wouldn't immediately assume that this place was still structurally sound, because earthquakes kind of have that keep going sort of after quakes and all that. So I wouldn't just head here, because we would want to make an assessment. And for example, if we were in that case here, we would work with the St. Andrew team to make an assessment like that. Is this structure still usable and safe for people to congregate before we used it as a shelter? So, because that's the last thing we want to do is move people and resources and everything here and be seeing cracks, in the beams and stuff like that. So we can't be in that position.
Thank you very much,
Luann?
Alan. So the next step is that the council is going to consider. So if you have some concerns or you have some ideas, please communicate with your council members. Thank you.